Come with me on a journey through the world of backup power. You might need it someday. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene, and Jonathan is thrilled about today's video. This is all part of the 30 Days of Preparedness collaboration. Thank you so much, Michelle from Big Valley Living, for inviting us to participate. And when she asked John the subject that he wanted to create a video on, oh my goodness, he's like been so excited all month. So this, you will learn a lot, but this is John's happy place.
It truly is. And, you know, it may be a little bit weird, but it's going to make her happy. So that makes me happy. And, you know, just all the numbers involved here. But she's going to be here to help because sometimes I get a little bit off into some technical stuff. She'll bring me back in and help you understand what we're talking about today.
Your power goes out. What are the things that are most important to you that you need electricity for? That's probably the first thing that we're going to talk about.
Our world revolves around electricity. Almost everything we do has an electrical component to it. And so, you know, trying to live without that, it's going to be some serious pain for a lot of people. Now, remember, our forebears back in the 1800s, they didn't have any of this stuff. And they lived happy, productive lives. So, you know, that's the other thing to think about. Okay, what do we really need? What are our critical loads? What are the critical needs that we need to meet? And the biggest thing that comes to my mind is medical equipment. There are a lot of people that need some kind of medical intervention that uses electricity. And this is something that I can really justify people having a backup power system for. There are other things that not so much. Entertainment, you know, some of those kinds of things.
I don't know, if you're a mom with a bunch of little kids, the amount of power that it would take to run that DVD player and that TV, it might be worth it.
She makes a really good point.
No judgment here.
Yeah. One of her things is her washing machine. And having done laundry by hand, I totally agree. And so we got a really efficient washing machine that takes very little energy. And it is awesome. So, you know, only you can decide what your critical loads are. Let's talk about how we figure out how much energy we're going to need. So after we decide what our critical loads are, then we're going to figure out.
Let's run through. So your critical load, let's take one.
Okay.
Like your CPAP machine.
Okay.
Say I need to figure out how much power I need to run my CPAP machine for, let's say, 8 hours a night. How do I do that?
The easiest way to do that is with one of these little energy monitors. And you can get these online. I pay usually about $15 to $30 for one of these.
He has a whole collection of them.
I do, actually.
And if you click the card in the corner, he actually created a video on how they work.
So this thing is truly magical to me because you can not only measure how much it takes instantaneously. So, you know, if I plug in any one of these appliances, I can see how much it's drawing. But I can also see how much it uses over time because something like a refrigerator or a freezer, it turns on for a little while, then it turns off for a little while, on, off. So we don't have to plan for that, whatever that's drawing when it's on, we don't have to plan for that all the time because it's not going to be on all the time. So this thing will allow us to measure what it uses over some period of time. And sometimes I'll go months. I'll measure something for months and I get a really good idea of how much that takes. And, you know, in the case of a fridge or freezer, say it's out in the garage, that's going to depend on whether it's winter or summer. In the summer, it's going to take a lot more energy to keep that fed than in the wintertime when it's colder in the garage. So
sometimes, like when we were experimenting with the power tools, sometimes the initial draw was so great that it was too much for the device, even though the device could have maintained it, but that initial load or whatever you call it was just way too much. And so it wouldn't work.
Yes, she makes a really great point. That's why she's here. Things with motors typically have a startup, and that sometimes that's 3 to 5 times its normal working energy need. And so you have to be able to account for that. This machine has, if I'm using this, it's got to be able to get up and over that initial hump, and then it's going to run at this level, but it took clear up over here to get it started. And so you make a good point. You need to understand what things you're running, and
this will show me.
that will help you understand what that is. And just recognize that that might be 3 to 5 times as much energy as it normally needs. After we've figured out how much energy we need, then we can start deciding on what kind of system we're going to need and what size of system we're going to need. And we're going to talk about some of those options here in just a moment.
Okay, Johnny, what exactly are my options?
Your options are endless, baby. No, there really are a few limits, but we're going to talk today about 2 different kinds of options. One of these is fuel-based generators and the other is solar. So let's start in with the fuel. Most of you are familiar with a generator. One of the most important things you will need to understand is, based on your previous homework, what size generator am I going to need? Now, this was a 2,000 watt generator. So for most people, this is going to meet most of your needs. Most medical equipment would be able to run on this. Lighting, your bread maker, your washing machine, all these things can run off of this.
Can I talk about a few of the drawbacks?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we should. We definitely should.
So, and he'll explain more stuff later, but one of the things, if you are using this to like run your CPAP machine, this is very noisy. And is it going to impact your sleep? It has to be outside, right? You're going to have to run a cord inside for your CPAP machine. The other thing is this is very heavy. The fuel, you have to carry the fuel to put in there. You have to start it using this
pull cord. Yes.
And so for some of us that aren't super strong, like for John, that's not even something he really thinks about. For me, it's huge because it's just a little bit too hard for me. Now, boy, would I want this if the sun wasn't out and my solar options weren't working. This is a fantastic backup, as long as I have Johnny to help me with this backup.
And we have to consider all these things. Maybe you need a cart to put this on, and maybe you need some neighbor kid to come and help you. Whatever it is, you've got to be able to run it. And that's part of all of this process, is making sure that it's going to work for you.
And maybe your fuel isn't stored in a 5-gallon container. Maybe you store your fuel in a 1-gallon or a 2-gallon, something that is manageable for you.
I'm glad you brought that up. When we're talking about these fuel-based generators, there's the old traditional standard generators and there's the new inverter generators. And seriously, if you can get the inverter generators, these are more efficient, they're quieter, they manage the load based on what's happening with whatever you're trying to run. This will adjust to whatever it needs to put out to run that load. Whereas the old generators, they're just running at a straight 3,600 RPMs all the time, and they're usually fairly loud. So if you can get the inverter generator, this is a much, much nicer way to go and a more efficient.
And that means to me that if I'm running a very expensive TV off of the old one, I could destroy my TV or my computer.
Yes.
But this one, it's much safer for it. The other thing, I think we actually bought this at either Costco or Sam's Club.
Sam's Club, yeah.
And so
we got it on sale.
You can totally find them.
And this is a good quality. It's not probably the highest quality, but it's a very, very good quality. It rates very well. And I'm glad you mentioned the power quality, because that is truly an important part of this. The old generators kind of have a more square wave or a modified sine wave. They're a little bit rough, where these put out a pure sine wave, which is very, very clean energy. That is important, especially with a lot of the new electronics. They can't handle that dirtier power.
So when it comes to using this, I put the gas in here.
Yep.
This one just takes gasoline, right?
This one is actually a dual fuel.
So it'll take diesel or?
Nope, we can run gasoline or propane.
Or propane.
And there's tri-fuel units out there if you want to be able to run it off of gasoline, propane, or natural gas. And so look for whatever feature is going to work for you. And I like the dual fuel because as Mama knows, I always love my options. I love options because it gives me the ability to do what works or what I have on hand.
And then once I start it, then I'm going to plug in whatever it is I want to run on this end, which is why sometimes you will need a very good quality extension cord, because this is going to produce toxins that you cannot have in your house.
Carbon monoxide is something you can't have inside.
And you don't want a cheap extension cord. You really need a high quality extension cord.
Yes. I should also mention on some of these units, you can actually connect 2 or 3 together. So if you are needing to
Like a
run
daisy
something,
chain?
well, I
No?
wouldn't call it daisy chaining. I would call it just hooking them together. There's cords that they will provide that you can hook 2 of them together and then run larger loads. So for most people, like I said, this is going to run most of what you need. But if you need something bigger, you could have 2 of these and then hook them together to be able to meet those bigger loads.
So if you weren't around, a solution that I could use for this would be to put the fuel in smaller tanks so that I could, or smaller containers so that I could manage them, and then maybe have this on a cart that has wheels so that I could move it around.
Move it where you need to keep it, so that mostly to keep it safe.
One of the other things I think that's important is if there is a power outage, and this makes a lot of noise, which kind of alerts all of your neighbors that you have a generator, which if you're not really careful about it, it might walk. Think about that and be careful. Find a way to make sure that it's in a secure location.
And again, these are much quieter than the old generators. So, but they still do make some noise, and somebody might pick up on that. So keep that in mind.
One huge caution before we get into solar is please store your fuel legally and safely. Now, solar.
Most of what people see out there is rooftop solar. And in most cases, that's not even going to be useful in a grid down situation. Most of that is grid tied. It's going onto the grid and not really benefiting whoever's house that's on. Now, some companies will provide you with some backup storage option or a plug that you can use.
Like one of our neighbors, she has one plug that they can use that gets directly from their solar, right?
Right. So during the day, they have one plug that they could run a freezer, a fridge, probably several items. You know, whatever that is, if you're going to do rooftop solar, I would definitely make sure you can have some backup option with that, whether it's some storage or a cord that you can use.
And our new system from Grid Down, it's the Grid Down readout. It's amazing because we've got a lot of backup battery storage that's EMP protected, but that's also hugely pricey. And so it's not for everybody, but if you are interested in something like that, go to griddown.com. They are amazing. Use the promo code Provident and they give you 7% off.
Let's talk about the components of a solar power system
in a way that I can understand.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Of course, the first component are the solar panels. Let's talk just a minute about solar panels. Obviously, a critical part of the system. If you're building a large solar power system, they're going to be hard framed panels that sit on your roof, on a pole or on the ground, whatever. I'm just talking right now about those for these little portable power stations. And most of the companies that make those stations also produce their own solar panels to go along with that. These usually have some kind of a pocket here that has the cords and such in it. And then they have a kickstand that will allow this to sit out in the sun like that. That's great, and these are really nice to be able to throw in the car. They're foldable and they're usually easily carryable. My personal preference, however, is to go with the hard frame panels also for my portable power stations. The thing I like about these is they are probably more durable. Those foldable panels, typically, if you're out in a wind, the wind's just going to tumble them. You don't really have a good way to anchor them down, although a lot of them do have grommets on them so that you could hook them to something or anchor them down somehow. But I love these rigid panels that have these frames on them. And then I can put sandbags or rocks or cinder block or whatever on these to keep them from tumbling in the wind. They're also, as you can see, adjustable so that I can go from all the way flat in the summertime to up at this kind of angle for winter. Everybody has their own ideas on these, and I actually like both because they both have a place, but I really like these because they are adjustable and because I can anchor them down. The next part of the system is a charge control system, which manages how those batteries are charged, your storage system, and how it's charged, because we don't want to overcharge those batteries.
Because without that, I'd blow up the battery.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we could cause some serious problems. The third portion of this is obviously the storage system, the batteries that hold all that energy. The fourth component is the inverter system, and that's what converts that stored energy into household energy that we can use. Now, a lot of these systems will also be able to have DC systems, USB cords and such.
Wait. What's AC and what's DC? Tell me the difference between those two.
Okay, the AC power is what we're using in our house.
So it runs my vacuum cleaner, it runs my lights.
Yeah, it runs everything in our home. And then the DC systems are direct current systems, charging our phones, charging any of the USB things. And you can also get DC appliances, but they're not very common. So we'll just leave that alone for right now. You can build your own solar power system. You can buy the panels, the charge controller, the batteries, and the inverter. And some people love to do that. But there's another option.
It's way too complicated for me. The other option is you buy it already done. Everything already works together, and it's pretty much plug and play.
That's really what it is. In this box here, you've got your charge controller, you've got your storage, and you've got your inverter.
And you can think about that and you can be excited about that. But all I have to know is that I plug the solar panel in and I plug whatever I need to use in, and I'm happy.
That's the beauty of these systems. These came on the market, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. They are awesome systems. They keep getting better and better. This is on the smaller side now. There's actually some that are smaller than this. And this is on the mid-size right here.
And when he's talking about size, he means this won't run my vacuum cleaner, right?
This will actually run your vacuum cleaner, but not for very long.
Okay.
And so let's talk about the three numbers that are really important. First of all, how much storage does this have? How much energy can you store in there? Because that's going to determine how big a device you can run and how long you can run that device. The second number we want to know is how much energy can it put out? How big of a vacuum could I run with this?
We actually did a video on that. We compared, I think it was 3 Jackeries, and ran like the blender, and the blender with just water was very different than the blender with ice.
Yeah.
And it was a kind of a fun comparison using the different sizes of the Jackeries.
And then the third number that you want to know is how fast can I charge this thing? How much solar energy can we stuff in here at one time? And all of these have those parameters, and you'll want to understand those, and you'll want to size that based on what you want and what's going to work for you.
There's one other little thing that you should be careful of too, is that how many times can I charge this before its life is over?
Right. And the newer systems, almost all of them are lithium iron phosphate, and I'm sure there will be new chemistries in the future. And so with those, we're usually talking around 3,000 to 5,000 cycles, which means we're going from clear full, we're using 80% of it down to 20% still in storage, and then we're charging it back up again. Some of the old systems, you only had 500. And so the systems have gotten a lot better, but yeah, you'll want to look at that. How many cycles can I put that through before it starts to have issues?
When you do these, you've got to practice. We had so much fun on a family camping trip, our family reunion, because our boys, Mike and Rob, wow, they were having so much fun. They had set up solar panels and they had different units, and they brought a refrigerator up camping, like a trailer with a refrigerator in it. And they were just bound and determined that they were going to get this all figured out and that they were going to be able to accomplish it. What a great time to practice. And as soon as the trip was over, they were already planning on how they were going to make it better for next year.
That's what it's all about, right? Just optimizing and optimizing. Now, one thing I should mention here, it just came to my brain, is that there are some things you may not want to run using some of these systems, like cooking, air conditioning, heating.
Why?
These are functions that take a lot of energy. I mean, they are huge amounts of energy. And it's not that you can't do that if you want to do that. You just have to understand that you're going to draw that system down really, really fast. And then it's going to take time for that to charge back up again. So typically we try and find other ways to heat, cool, and cook.
Because it makes more sense. But we did do some experiments with an induction cooktop, just a little one.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I want to say we kept it on about medium, like high was too much. But
for the power station we were using, yes. We couldn't run it on the high settings, but we could run it on the lower settings up to about halfway. And it did a great job, very efficient cooking. Yeah.
Now, with the new grid down readout system that we have that does the whole house, I use that and it doesn't make any difference at all.
Well, it kind of does. Yesterday, we had 2 freeze dryers running, 2 ovens running, air conditioning running, And we actually got an alert on our system that the uses were really high. But those are intense loads that we put on it.
Looks to me like you need to add a little bit to our system because I have more needs that need to be met.
But it still met it. But it was saying, okay, we're starting to approach a limit that, maybe we don't want to cross. So I think you should ask me what my favorite system would be.
Jonathan, what would your favorite system be?
Well, what I always recommend, I love the solar side. I love these systems, these portable power stations or solar power systems. They are awesome. And to the extent we can use them all the time, that's great. But most of the time you can't. We're going to go through winter here in a few months, and we're going to have a lot of cloudy days, snowy days. On those days, you're just not going to get enough energy in. And so I like that with the inverter generator, that we're only going to use that inverter generator when we need to. And hopefully that's just once a week or once every 2 weeks. But having that combination, again, it's the options, but it gives us that ability to run off the solar as much as possible.
Because it's free.
But back it up, with another fuel-based system if we need to.
Now, with these, I'd actually like to talk about John's mom for a second. Emily is fabulous. She's been on our show a lot. In fact, if you click the card in the corner, it'll take you to a video on the perfect power system that Jonathan got for her. And we had to make some modifications to it because she is 88 years old. And yet she's still completely independent, but she just can't lift very much. So he bought a special cart for her. She loves to sew. Her sewing machine is downstairs. So he bought a really good quality extension cord that was the right length to go from the gauge to go from the power station upstairs downstairs to her sewing machines, because that was one of her things. That was one of her critical loads. If the power's out, she still wants to be able to sew. And so she can very easily, because that cart, she can take it from her family room into her bedroom at night for her medical equipment, and it works out really well. So if you want to see how it's working with her, you're going to want to check out that video.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that was a lot of information, but some of the really important things that you need to think about before you buy a system is, can I manage this system?
And can your system manage what you need it to?
Very good point. So it can't be too heavy. It can't be so complicated that you don't understand how to use it. So the plug and play thing for me is really valuable, because if the boys or John's here, no problem, I just let them worry about it. But for me, I don't function on that same level of excitement for all this stuff, so I don't know it as well. So make sure that it's something that you can manage.
And a lot of these systems now actually have wheels on them because they've gotten larger. A lot of them will have built-in wheels. This goes underneath this. So this will just sit on, and this just rolls wherever mama needs it to roll. And some of them have a handle that will come out like luggage with wheels on the back. And so those are handy features. And the manufacturers realize this because some of those systems are 100 pounds or more.
The other thing is, make sure that you buy quality. We probably 2 times a week, we get advertisements or we get solicitations to be affiliates for some different power stations. There are so many knockoffs from China and things that you've got to make sure you are really careful, because this is something, when you need it to work, you really need it to work, and we can't afford for it not to work. So make sure that you buy quality, buy a reputable brand. We are really excited about something that we can't share yet, but there's going to be a really cool one in a few months coming out that we're really excited about. But like Emily's, the one that she has, it works fantastically well for her.
And make sure that you practice. We so often have people say, yeah, I bought it. It's in a box. I've never used it, but it's there if I need it. No. And it does need some maintenance. I pull these out every 3 or 4 months and just check the storage level in it. And there are some that do really well, that hold that storage really well, and some that lose it through natural processes. Just make sure you pull it out, you use it, and then I charge it back up to the level that I like, which is about 60 to 70%.
Unless we think something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then he fully charges it. Like if we were preparing for a hurricane or some big winter storm or something, he would pull them out and he would charge them completely.
Yeah.
But he doesn't store them that way.
They're better off if you store them at, typically they say 40 to 60%, but I'm a prepper, and so I like to fudge that up just a little bit because, yeah, because I'm taking care of you.
Okay, and the other thing I want to point out is just because John knows how to use this doesn't mean it's any good for me unless I learn how to use it, right?
Yeah.
Because if John's not here, I might have a really good tool, which is completely useless to me because I didn't take the time to practice with it myself.
Yeah. And now for the question of the day. Going back up into the video a bit, what are your critical loads? And what concerns do you have about being able to meet those? So let's have some discussion, and thanks for being part of the solution.
And make sure that you go back and look at the 30 Days of Preparedness playlist so that you can learn from some other really good preppers.